Before we talk about anything else in this video, first off, I just want to say that people losing their jobs in tier 2 or game changers or whatever absolutely sucks. And it really sucks that people can't make Valorant their dream job, as I'm sure it would be for many, many people. But we have to talk today about the absolute meltdown that is going on with people talking about tier 2 Valorant esports. And the first thing we have to talk about is this tweet from Dapper here, who says, quit CS because of a dying tier 2 scene, then after 3 years, Valorant has a dying tier 2 scene. Hate to say the writing was on the wall, but it truly was as soon as the franchising was announced and had an artificial line was drawn. Hope everybody affected lands on their feet. Now, I am really sick of this argument that franchising was a bad idea for this game, because I could not disagree more. And the truth of the matter is, to me, is what Jacob Toft Anderson, who works for 100 Thieves, said here, that Valorant was only so competitive because teams were eager to be a part of Riot's ecosystem. Without it, we likely wouldn't have seen such heavy investment in the early stages of the game, and many players may have never gotten the opportunity to play professional to begin with. And I absolutely agree. The tweet there basically pointing out that without that kind of promise of franchising is coming, many of those tier 2 orgs who gave players a professional job playing Valorant at the start of the game just would have never been in the scene to begin with, and they would have just been on free agent teams instead. So really, the promise of franchising probably actually gave people jobs for a couple years there, whilst we were in that kind of waiting process to see who got announced for franchising. And the thing is, franchising, partnership, whatever you want to call it, it brings stability. And in times like these, more than anything, you need stability. And stability is good, obviously, not just for the orgs, or obviously the players who can get onto those orgs, but it's also good for the fans as well, right? In terms of investing into the long-term storylines of what's going on, it really does help, whether you're a casual or a diehard fan, right? It's my job to watch Valorant esports. But before the franchising leagues, it was difficult for even me to keep up with what's going on in LATAM, what's going on in Brazil, what's going on in all these little tiny, Asian regions as well, right? Even I, and it is my job to do so, even I couldn't keep up with it all. But now I could tell you exactly what's going on in each of the 3 leagues from last year. I have a good idea of where every team is, what they've done, what I think about that, what they were doing last year. And for a casual fan, of course, you're probably not going to know about every team in every league, but, whatever your region is, you probably have a decent idea of what's going on in that one league. And it's going to be much easier for you as well when big international tournaments come along to know, like, oh, hey, crew, this team went 0-9 last year, but now won LCQ, right? That's very easy to just quickly look at and get a good idea of who these teams are and where these storylines are going in terms of Valorant because of this system. And so partnership franchising was always going to happen and led to that early investment. And I think long term, we'll see some of those benefits play out more and more as we go on with these storylines and these teams going forward. But now let's talk about tier 2 specifically, because Leo, he has a way of, I think, saying words that maybe aren't the best. And this was a quote as well from him. We are not looking for stability in tier 2, but rather for it to be a league that develops talent for VCT Americas. Now, I think that Leo can sometimes say words that he doesn't necessarily have to. Like, there's probably a better way of wording this. We are not looking for stability in tier 2. But this is something that Riot has kind of said in different words before as well. That essentially they don't want tier 2 players who just stay in tier 2 their whole career and they're just a tier 2 Valorant pro. That is not really what they're looking for. Now, some of you, of course, will disagree fundamentally with what Leo is saying there and think that that's just a bad decision by Riot and you just don't agree with it, which is absolutely fine. That's a perfectly fine take to have. But what I would argue back from Riot's perspective is, why does Riot want an esport? Why would they bother with having a Valorant esport to begin with? What are the reasons for it, right? And some reasons are that, you can cultivate kind of a fan base who follows this game pretty closely and is probably more likely to keep up with the game and be playing the game, and probably more likely, although I don't fully know this, but I would probably guess people who watch the esports and are involved with it, are probably more likely to buy skins as well than, just a casual player who doesn't watch any esports whatsoever. Again, I'm not 100% sure of that, but it seems like a reasonable suggestion. And also, of course, for the prestige of having it, right? That Riot can say, hey, look at this cool thing we did in the Kia forum last year with all these people cheering and screaming to watch our video game. That brings a certain level of prestige and honor of having to do that. And so if we think that those are some of the reasons of why have an esport in the first place, well, then ask yourself, what does having a stable tier 2 really bring to that equation? And having a thriving tier 2 maybe helps a tiny bit in terms of, it'll make long-term tier 1 better because you're going to develop probably better players, so the product might be slightly better. But is the investment of having tier 2 be this thriving place worth it for Riot to perhaps improve the product slightly? And I mean, if you look at other tier 2 examples across not just esports, but sports as well, a lot of them are struggling, right? Like I was reading about tennis here that, basically for years it's been said by countless people that tennis is too top heavy when it comes to money. The top few players are elaborately compensated, while hundreds of world-class tennis players who are ranked just behind them struggle financially. And this is not just for tennis. You can go to almost every sport and say that that is probably the case for a tier 2 system in that sport. People are struggling financially. And so there aren't a ton of thriving tier 2 systems out there across not just esports, but sports. But obviously one of the big arguments for trying to keep tier 2 alive and trying to keep that flame alive is so that you can develop talent to help tier 1, and help keep it fresh and whatnot. But the thing is that I would counter this argument with is that Riot is doing some things to keep that alive, even if they aren't paying attention fully to the tier 2 esports, right? We saw them recently announce that for next year, we're going to have affiliate teams, player loans, two-way players, right? All of these things are helping develop talent from the tier 1 teams. So yes, whilst it seems like Riot is not looking to, really help out the tier 2 system in Valorant, they are providing basically ways for the tier 1 teams to pick up some of that slack. And you have to remember, with the tier 1 teams, Riot has a system where they pay them more, basically, for the more they do for the league. Now, I don't know because I'm obviously not privy to this information, but if I was Riot, if I was going to pay people more money, for their stipend or whatever in the tier 1 system, these are the kind of things that I would be including in it, right? Do you have an affiliate team? If so, we'll pay you more, right? Are you, getting players and loaning them out to tier 2 and helping develop talent, right? If you can prove that you're doing that, pay them more, right? For being in the league. That's the kind of thing that if I was Riot, I would definitely be looking to do. And so, if Riot know what they're doing, hopefully they are. And so that is a way of potentially offsetting, the lack of tier 2 is that, well, we have affiliate teams, or, well, we're signing 16 and 17-year-old players to tier 1 teams. They actually can't play in VCT, but we're loaning them out until they are old enough and allowing them to develop, in the meantime, right? That is, I think, how Riot is kind of processing this and trying to kind of, help pick up some of that slack of not having a thriving tier 2. And again, it sucks. Of course, we all want, tier 2 to be thriving. That's the ideal. Riot obviously would want that as well because it's only a benefit to them. But I think you have to look at it from Riot's perspective and say, like, it's not really on them because what they want to achieve with their esport, having a thriving tier 2 is probably just not worth the cost for the benefits that it's going to give them. And so look, it's very unfortunate that people are losing their jobs, and I don't want to downplay that either because it happens very, very fast, right? That one day you dream that Valorant is going to be your job, and then the next day it's ripped away from you, and that absolutely sucks, right? And I don't really want to downplay that in any way. I just wanted to provide kind of some reasonable logic, I hope, to why this might have come about, and that this was probably the way that things were just going to go when we get this kind of global, financial climate that we find ourselves in.